From the time of our arrival in Aotearoa, Māori have created a unique architectural history. Our structures not only house people, but also our dreams, our fundamental needs, and our histories. So what can we tell about ourselves from these buildings? What do they say to us? It's a question I've asked myself constantly. I'm Ro Hoskins, and as a director of an architectural practice, understanding the stories held within the walls of our buildings has been a lifelong obsession. In this series, we're going to take you on a journey to explore not just our architectural structures, but also the social and cultural histories from which our buildings arise. We'll ask, what is Māori architecture? And celebrate some of our most stunning buildings. During and after the New Zealand Wars was a time of great upheaval for many Māori. It was also a period of intense activity in meeting house construction. Changes were also occurring in the design of meeting houses. Changes that can be attributed to the influence of a man of great mana. The man's name was Te Kooti Rikirangi. The religion he founded was Ringatu. In doing so, Te Kooti changed the face of Christianity in Aotearoa. He also changed the face of the wharenui. He was a man who lived by the feather as well as the sword. A man whose story inspires awe and even mystery. To this day, there's not a single image of Te Kooti Rikirangi Te Turuki that has been verified as his real likeness. After a long period of warfare, some Māori leaders felt compelled to demonstrate their mana and the solidarity of their people through building. Many Māori were becoming disillusioned with missionary-style Christianity and started developing their own Christian Māori religions. Ringatu brought religion into the wharenui, so they needed to be large to accommodate services and often took on the proportions of churches. Te Kooti brought the East Coast tradition of whare whakairo to his wharenui, but also added new colours to carvings such as greens and blues that had never been seen before in meeting houses. But most significantly, he used figurative painting inside and outside to demonstrate contemporary scenes. The meeting houses were often built by Ringatu followers in anticipation of Te Kooti coming to open them. Te Whaiatamotu is the premier whare of Tūhoe and was built to honour Te Kooti.
Te Whaiatamotu is the result of a group of Tūhoe rangatira who got together after the War of Te Kooti and Tānewhirinaki in 1872, and that war resulted in the devastation of Tūhoe. The name of the house is Te Whaiatamotu. Literally, Te Whaiatamotu means the pursuit of the island. Not the flight in the island, but the pursuit of Te Kooti by the island. Whole settlements were destroyed, so they had to rise from the ashes of the war. Tūhoe had never attempted to build a house of this magnitude in their history. They needed a symbol that they could look to for hope. Te Kooti was invited to open the house in 1888 because with his opening of a house also came the added prophecy. And prophecy was good. Te Kooti then uttered, "Are you sure that you want your house to be made sacred?" "Yes," was the reply. "All right, let me then utter the prophecy for this house." The prophecy of this house is, "Ka waiho tēnei whare, hei whare toro perepere moni." This house will be a house for the dissemination of money. A house where money will be strewn about is another interpretation. The second part of the whakatauki, ko te kai mō roto I tēnei whare he pū ngā werewere. A literal translation, the food of this house will be cobwebs.
Many of Te Kooti's prophecies took the form of riddles. The imagery of the cobwebs has many interpretations, from the literal to the poetic.
A spider web, you could say, is one of the wonders, architectural wonders of the natural world. And it is, and I think for Tūhoe, this wharenui is an architectural wonder. And it is a real taonga, yet like a spider web, it is hidden away in a place that not many people see it, and is often brushed aside and cleaned up for something that, in a modern context, aesthetically might be a little bit more pleasing. But the wonder of a spider web is much like this place, but they are lonely. In many ways they are lonely, and this, you know, with a tribe like Tūhoe and Ruatahuna, you know, they say we estimate 80% of our people live away from home. I think it's probably higher than that.
The first part of Te Kooti's prophecy is open to a much more direct interpretation. In the first decades after Te Whaia Te Motu was opened, the tapu of this whare was rigidly enforced by the rangatira. But later, the whare fell into uses that were far less sacred.
That generation of rangatira died out, and a new generation arose. This generation had been influenced by the world around them. Card games, gambling was a big part of this house. The house literally became a place where money was strewn about.
It seemed Te Kooti's prophecy had been fulfilled. Te Whaia Te Motu went from one extreme to another. The house fell into disrepair and was unused for many years. But another generation of leaders arose and they decided to breathe new life into the whare. They dismantled the house, it was re-erected, and in 1932 the whare was restored and reopened with its unique Tūhoe architecture.
The floor of the original was earth, so everything was stuck into the earth. They cut away the rotted pieces and then carved pieces and joined them together, and you can see the difference. Another feature of the house are the depictions of trees on 4 heke of the house. We have depictions of birding activities, the hunters spearing birds. The dimensions of the house were huge for those times. It's probably one of the few houses that only has one window and one entrance, one doorway. When we talk about knowledge emanating from the darkness, you know, that's a very Māori view about where knowledge resides. And the Māori view is that it resides in the darkness. The back of the house here is the most dark place in the building, and into culture, the back wall is the wall of the gods. The gods are in the darkness, and so you don't have understanding unless you know what darkness is.
But along with the other prophecies for Tūhoe, the prophet foresaw that the land would be consumed by fire.
The last bit of that prophecy, for mine, in a modern context, talks about the difficulties that will come, the land issues, the isolation, the difficulties, the cultural issues. This house is a very defiant stance. It was built in probably the worst era for Tūhoe. We had been decimated, and that is true. Some of the atrocities that occurred in this region were not repeated anywhere else. We're talking about scorched earth policies, mass executions, murders. And as a response to that, we built probably of its time the most monumentous and grand wharenui of its era. As a real defiant stance, I think, to everyone that at our worst we can do this. This is what has brought us together. It's like saying, well, you did this to us, but we can still produce this when things are at their worst. Imagine what we can do when we're at our best.
The story of Te Kooti's pursuit through the long shadows of the Urewera is the stuff of legends. and it has not been forgotten in the magnificent Ringatu architecture that he left behind. In 1865, Te Kooti was fighting with government forces against the Hauhau when he was accused of spying and imprisoned on the Chatham Islands without trial. In this island prison, Te Kooti had a series of mystical visions, and he created a new faith called Ringatu. With his newly converted followers, Te Kooti led a highly successful revolt and escaped back to New Zealand. But the colonial militia tried to intercept the Ringatu faithful as they travelled through the Urewera. Thus began years of pursuit through the shadows of the forest. Te Kooti became the most wanted man in New Zealand and our greatest guerrilla warrior. Te Kooti was one of our greatest prophets, the creator of the Ringatu religion and a leader in the architectural development of the meeting house, both during and after the New Zealand Wars. Though Te Kooti will always be associated with the conflicts of the New Zealand Wars, he was first and foremost a man of religion. A religion symbolised and named after this, Ringatu, the upraised hand.
Gloria ki toi ingoa tapu. Amen. Ki wanga nui ia mātou I tēnei rā te wairua tapu. Hei āwhina. It was on the 1st of January 1882 that this house was opened by Te Kooti. The significance of the day was really, really very high in the calendar of the devout followers of the Ringatu faith. And especially because Te Kooti himself was going to open the whare.
E hanga ia te ona ki a Te Kooti. Katoa ngā whakairo tēnei whare. Ka rei rere ki atu I ngā whare a Te Kooti. Te whai a te motu tera, ko te tokanga nui anoho tera. Heuri te kotoa ngā pupu, nā te mea. Nā ko ngā kai whakairo, ngā tangata no a Te Kooti.
The style of building, I think, is in the Te Kooti style of building. I think in regards, I suppose, to his view and vision is that the houses should be big. They should be also have enough space to accommodate big hui-huis. You know, we can only envy and marvel at how in that time they could build something so big.
If there's one thing you notice when you first walk into a Ringatu house, it's the sheer size of the whare. Te Kooti directed that these new whare were large, and that was to cater for the expanding congregations of the Ringatu faith. They also, of course, had to cater for regular wharenui functions such as hui between hapu and iwi around the motu. Te Kooti also encouraged these whare to be fully carved and painted, and of course with the regular decoration in the kōwhaiwhai in the ceiling here. Interestingly, in 1927, when the tukutuku was redone, it was actually done using painting as opposed to kiekea. Te Kooti also brought his own tohunga whakairo to assist with these projects with whakawas from Rongo Whakata, Ngāti Porou and Kahungunu. Ringatu whare also began to be more pan-tribal, picking up on ancestors from neighbouring iwi in an attempt to unify those groupings. And a case in point here is Puhi, my ancestor from Mātātua Waka, who lived most of his life in the Taitokero. Directly across from him you have Henemihi from Te Arawa. The decoration of this whare and the way the popo reach out to other iwi are distinctly Ringatu. And when Te Kooti opened o Rua Taupare in 1882, he did so with another unique Ringatu tradition.
During the opening ceremonies, Te Kooti entered into the house and uttered a revelation. I see one wall resounding to the challenges of the other, the back to the front, the young sibling to the elder sibling, the son to the father.
Most of his prophecies are in riddles, and basically it's up to you to determine how you can interpret. And we've had those conflicts. And in the earthquake, we also, our tupuna whare also suffered in that earthquake. They actually leaned curved over. And that is how Ruamoko, challenged us, the conflict Ruamoko had with our tupuna whare. She's still standing, although a bit bent and bowed, she still stands proudly here.
A lot of people dwell on this kupu whakaari, papakinga pakitara, mainly on the negative. I always throw in mine, it's not the papaki mo te mea, it's the resounding walls, the front to the back, the sides, the resounding of their karakia and their waiata
Yes.
and all that. That was my interpretation of that kupu whakaari.
Te Kooti was many things. The leading symbolic figure of Māori resistance in the New Zealand Wars. He was the prophet who founded the Ringatu religion. He was the man who introduced a new and distinctive form of architecture to Aotearoa. And he's a towering figure in our history whose influence echoes across the centuries to this day. The meeting house played a central role in Ringatu thought and life. Over 40 wharenui were constructed between 1869 and 1908, supporting Ringatu religious and political life during these times. Among the most notable whare still standing today is Te Tokanganui Anoho in Te Kooti. Built in 1873, Te Kooti supervised the construction of the house that was built for King Tāwhiao. Like many Ringatu meeting houses, Te Tokanganui Anoho was built in the Ringatu style, with figurative paintings and carvings painted in blues and greens. Today, only some of these features can still be seen. But Te Kooti's legacy lives on.
There's an old saying from this particular area, Te Kooti tanga o ngā maunga, Te Kooti tanga o ngā whakaaro, Te Kooti tanga o te tangata, which implies that the narrowing in of the hills, then the coming together of great minds and also the coming together of many people.
So that was there was a defensive element to Te Kooti's choice of Maniapoto too.
To get into this particular area, our sentries could view any group coming from the north, especially the government troops from up here on the hill called Pukenui. It was a hemming in, and if they did come into this particular valley, there was more advantage to us as a people at that time for fighting.
This wharenui has a unique history. The house has been disassembled, moved and reassembled 3 times. And the whare has been given a different name for each of its locations.
One of the names they had was called Rawaho, which could indicate to us that a person coming from outside, which would probably be Te Kooti and his many followers, had another name on the other side on the second move called Te Tokanganui Amitu. And Tāwhiao gave the name for this particular whare, Te Tokanganui Anoho.
And as the name implies, here the house now stays. In return for the refuge offered to him and his faithful, Te Kooti and his followers built the wharenui as a gift. And so the koha was the whare, and the whare was really in recognition of Maniapoto's benevolence towards him.
Exactly. Ko te whareniki tuake nei ai, nā Te Kooti tā koha mo Maniapoto. Some people say it was given to Tāwhiao, some people say it was given to Maniapoto. But regardless, Tāwhiao is Maniapoto, half Maniapoto and half Waikato.
Te Kooti was not afraid to try new approaches to whare decoration in particular.
I can recall with great pleasure sitting with my kaumātua Bob Emery at that time, and him telling me that the mahu under the mahu was the colours of the rainbows, uenuku. And unfortunately, they painted. I think people think we only could see red, white, and black, but that's my understanding of it. That it was the colours of the rainbow, and as you can see, our wharenui is inside is red, white, and black anyway. Mm-hmm. If you look at the front of the wharenui itself, you'll see that a lot of the carvings are carved with old tools, hence the thickness and the depth of some of the carvings. So I understand he used a lot of the traditional tools, him and his kaimahi at that time.
The style of whakairo was very, you might say, representational. You can almost pick which tupuna you're looking at by what they're doing or holding.
If you look at, say, Tamata Kapua, who is behind me, you'll see him standing on the two stilts. He nui ngā kōrero mo Tamata Kapua ka waihotia kia Tarawa Waka.
And Maui in particular, you know, he's holding a sabre.
My understanding, he's holding the fish hook which
the
pulled
fish
up
Te Waka
Maui. And if you look at it, he's holding also the sun where it talks about, they say Maui was, they say Pākehā invented daylight saving. Now, Maui invented daylight saving.
Despite the lengthy period that Te Kooti spent in the King Country, he had no followers from Ngāti Maniapoto or Waikato, so Te Tokonga Nui a Noho is not considered to be a Ringatu house. As today's elders remember, the strong influence of many beliefs were felt in this area. But this house remained true to Pai Mairere, the religion of the kingitanga.
Pai Mairere was always here, and it never left here. The Anglican Church, the Methodists, and Catholicism then started to play its part. And so the missionaries emerged here. But Pai Mairere was always here.
But while Te Kooti's religion wasn't adopted here, the respect for the prophet and his influence over this place remain unquestioned.
You only need to look at these carvings. And the first thing that comes to mind, you know, we're now 128 years. You'd have to say that the intellect of the person was of the highest order. Who would predict that 128 years later, the Maniapoto carving over there with a cave at the bottom of it is one of the most significant places here in the whole of Ngāti Maniapoto, which is the Waitomo Caves.
At the time of his work on Te Tokonga Nui a Noho, Te Kooti made another prophecy. It said he predicted that Angarara, a taniwha belching flames, would one day rampage through the site of the house. The wharenui no longer stands on its original site. The house had to be moved when the main trunk line was put through. Many believe the fulfilment of Te Kooti's prophecy can be linked to this, that the train is the taniwha belching flames through the place. And like so many times in his life, the prophet got it right. For Te Kooti, the building of a whare was, in this case, a tākoha, but it also symbolised a lot more.
It realised our whakapapa. It realised the pain and the destitution of our people at that time, brought us together to celebrate who we are. This is our whakaruruhau that keeps us safe. It's a place of refuge, not only for Te Kooti and Tāwhiao, but people of my age and my children and my grandchildren at this particular time. So the dream of Te Kooti has been realised. Not only has he Did we give Te Kooti shelter? But Te Kooti gave us shelter.
For a time, Te Kooti Rikirangi was the most hunted man in the history of this country. But looking back from the perspective of more than a century, Te Kooti left a very different legacy. A religion based on the principles of peace and of love, and a heritage of some of the most remarkable buildings in Māori architecture.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.